Welcome back, everyone, and those affected by the Brite Advisors receivership. If any of you have been paying attention online, you will see it has been a busy few weeks, and finally there's been some good news, and then backwards a step as usual with Brite. But obviously October has been a big update with the interim distribution information. And this morning, our in-house expert, Jonathan Laws, is joining us from London. Good morning, John. How are you?
Morning, Dom. Bunged up with man flu, but otherwise I'm doing okay.
All right, very good. Hopefully by the time you get to the end of this video, you're going to have a clear understanding of the timeline for payouts. But obviously we always caveat, this is Brite and anything can happen. But we're going to do our best to put you in an educated, informed position to understand potentially what can happen between now and January or whenever that date may be. John, just to recap, can you quickly remind us what's happened with the Brite Advisor situation and how are so many people affected?
Yeah, so obviously Brite Advisors was a big advice to international expat planning wealth firm that had their own integrated platform. That platform was running into issues. There's all sort of potential shenanigans and whatnot that went on there, and effectively loads of British expats, a lot of them in the US, but several in the typical other areas of the Australias, the Europes, but also loads of miscellaneous places as far away as Taiwan, some in South America, etc. Have now been caught up where their platform is now defunct, funds are potentially missing or are missing, and now people are sort of looking for a new home to where to move from whilst all the sort of things go through the courts.
Understood. And that brings me nice on to my next question. So the latest court filing, McGrathNicol have now filed their proposed interim distribution application. What does that mean in plain English, John?
Yeah, so the whole point of this interim distribution is that everyone's been sick of waiting around, not being able to access all their money. And McGrathNicol, the idea of this was, well, if there's loads of money that's sitting here, in investments inside your pension wrappers or direct investments, why don't we get that back to you, so you can go and spend it or reinvest it or whatever it may be, and we'll just hold back some funds that we need to keep all the other sort of work streams going and funded. And that's the whole point of this interim distribution, of why they've applied it, so they can get as much of the funds back to Brite members now as possible.
And can you give us an example then, sort of walk us through it from the court hearing to when you think clients could actually receive funds? What do you think are kind of the steps left, and what happens during this? This next phase now?
Yeah, so just put a bit of a timestamp on this. There's just been a big new update we received just prior to this video, so we will incorporate that into this. But the biggest sort of timeline, big steps are, there's a big court hearing on the 13th of November. Ostensibly, that is to sort of ratify this interim distribution application, which is effectively we're going to return as many funds as possible, minus this this withheld funds, that will incorporate receivers fees, but the big one being tax that might be paid, other charges. There's a few people sort of caught up in all of this who haven't figured out or haven't confirmed their entitlements. Obviously, that's got to be ring fenced just to confirm all of that. There's some stuff of what happens if there's a market crash or downturn between now and the funds being liquidated and sold. So again, there's a provision there, pretty aggressive provision, 35%. So a lot of the money that's being withheld back, hopefully, touch wood, is very likely to be sort of sent back at a second payment. But no, the biggest source of things at this day, the court orders, post this 13th of November hearing. Then there's a liquidation window. That's a 21 business day window where the fund manager will go ahead and sell down all these assets. Then there is a 20 business day window for those assets to be returned, to your trustees, your SIP provider, your QRIPS provider, or directly to you if you own these yourselves. So those are sort of the two big days, which gives a rough sort of date. This could all change, and when the court orders change, and maybe the timeline shifts a little bit, or the amount of days provided for each sort of stage of the timeline changes. But sort of mid January, in theory, should be when most of these the funds and payments are made for this big interim distribution.
Yeah, well, you answered my next question there. I was going to ask you in terms of timeline and what could happen in between now and then. We've obviously been following Brite here at Cameron James right from the beginning. As CEO and founder, it kind of made my blood boil as I started to get the information through. So we've done a good research and education journey of this throughout, and there have been twists and turns. So yes, that date is whilst we're all hoping and praying that people are going to have a late Christmas present and things are going to be sorted in January. Let's obviously wait and see. John, I just want to go back quickly to something you said there, which I think is a really important point about interim distribution and then there being a secondary distribution. And obviously, I think for a lot of clients, what they're not realizing is people are obviously, well, a lot of the clients I've spoken with, I've fielded quite a few calls from Brite clients just for them to be like, I don't want to jump from the fire into the pan or out of the fire into the pan, whatever the phrase is. A lot of people have obviously been asking about trying to understand, well, hang on a minute, you can't necessarily just leave your trustee. I know we have a separate video on trustees, but you can't necessarily just leave your trustee entirely because you have an amount of capital that's going to become accessible. Then there's going to be a further tranche of capital accessible. That further tranche of capital accessible would surely have to go back to the original trustee rather than say if they were to move trustee before the second tranche of capital became available?
No, not necessarily, but there are a lot of different pension schemes and arrangements and SIP rules around interim distributions, but then also as well, a lot of the best SIP providers out there that we like to use, the Novia Globals of the world, they're integrated trust platforms, so they can't accept Brite assets. So no, you can still do a change of trustee for those in QOps. We've already been started doing that, and that they will be able to change trustee prior to any distribution, touch wood, and be able to receive both. So you won't need to keep your original trustee, but there will be many people who will because of certain reasons, already access the pension, can't change to a certain quote unquote better trustee because the better trustees won't accept the assets yet. Or whatever it may be. So it's very complicated. Each person's position will be different. It depends who your trustee is, how you access benefits, where do you live, where are you going to live, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's not a one size fits all approach by any stretch of the imagination, even if, a lot of the people in the Brite group are homogenous. You do need to take independent, third party advice to review your situation and advise the best course of action accordingly.
Yeah, and I probably haven't read them in as much detail as you, but I did pick out something interesting from the Receivers report, which was a circa 31% growth since the receivership had began, which I think surprised a lot of people. Can you explain what's behind that performance?
Yeah, so effectively, again, we can all be annoyed with the receivers and how long it's taken, and I appreciate Brite members in particular will be, especially annoyed about how long it's dragged on. Although, to be honest, 2 years for receivership of all the sort of naughtiness that went on in the background there, as someone who was involved in receiverships back in my, my Big Four PwC days, is not particularly long. But yeah, credit to them. Rather than, go ahead and stick it all in cash like a lot of people would have done, they actually went ahead and reinvested it and actually invested it as per the model portfolio. So because of that, now some of this is luck, but the global stock markets have been very good over the past, coming up to 2-year anniversary. It was the 13th of December 2023 was when the receivership officially started. Global markets are up a lot, and the receivers and the assets they are looking after have benefited extensively from that. So, credit where credit's due, because they invested in the global markets. The global markets are up extensively. So are the Brite assets. So, in theory, we'll see what happens with the latest update, which I'm sure we'll discuss. And that was subject to change as well. But it's it looks like most people are going to end up with a lot more coming out of it than they went into the receivership because of that growth. Now there's still loads of money missing, and we'll see if there's litigation and all the rest of it. But I bet, and if I asked each Brite person, hey, we're sitting here in the 13th of December, your money's just gone into receivership. There's been all this sort of, directors breaches and this, that, and the other, and $123.5 million potentially is a shortfall. Here's what your pot's worth now. Fast forward 2 and a bit years. Do you think you're going to be receiving a check, proverbial check, for a lower or higher amount? And I bet 99 out of 100 people would have said lower, and the answer is very likely to be actually higher. So again, that's credit to McGrathNicol for keeping the funds invested.
And I think I think as well that almost, I mean, if I was in that position and I had to oversee this type of thing, I think you would almost be scared that if you didn't invest the money and markets do what they do, 3 out of every 4 years are a positive one. If the money had been invested into the ETFs it was supposed to be in, then you might be looking at lawsuits, people saying, well, you should have invested the money. So yeah, it's a good job that that's happened. John, as well, just on that point, we're talking about the portfolios. We've also mentioned, or they've mentioned, that 97% of assets are in highly liquid ETFs. How is this a positive for holders, and how can it help with client payouts?
Yeah, well, what it means is when it actually comes to sell down things, it's going to be quick. You haven't got all these weird and I would say wonderful, but terrible, unfortunately, too often in this space, weird and wacky investments that take weeks to sell. There's no buyers for them because they're rubbish or they're liquid. And there's only certain people that can buy them. So what that means is when they actually go and click the sell button, it's not going to drag down the prices are going to shoot down because you're selling a huge holding of these funds. When you look at the McGrathNicol portfolios and you look at the asset register, it's big, it's S&P 500, it's FTSE 100, it's emerging market ETF, blah blah blah. Yes, there are some more esoteric, smaller, more liquid, more kind of off-piste investments there, but they are few and far between. And as the fund manager referenced, and we referenced in the blog, 97% of all of ETF or all assets are these super liquid ETFs. A lot of them as well. We've already obviously opined on the fact that retail investors aren't supposed to have US listed ETFs because it violates MiFID II disclosure laws. Not the platform or the Brite Advisors seem to realise that. I'll let you make your own thoughts there. But that, for this purposes, is great because that means they're even bigger than the UK, the quote unquote compliant versions. So that means they sell even quicker. The spreads on them are even smaller. So that means 97% if you click sold sale right now, it would have an immaterial effect on the price. They're also ETFs as well, so you're not actually buying and selling the underlying holdings. When you buy an ETF, it's tracking something. So if it's tracking the market, whether you put 100 billion or £10 into it, it's not going to have any impact on the underlying ETF price because that ETF price is dictated to by what happened to Amazon, what happened to what happened to Tesla, what happened to Nvidia, etc. So no, really good. That means it's going to be quite a quick, smooth sale. And that sort of 21-day working day window they provided, so a month, as well within reach. In theory, for that stuff, you give them a week, they could get it done.
And what about FX? And obviously, there's been a lot of people talking about this on the groups and the forums and whatnot. Are clients exposed to an FX risk? Obviously, on the sale of assets to create liquidity.
Yeah, so when it comes to FX, you are sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't sometimes, which is why like hedging and whatnot exists. A lot of the assets are USD denominated. A lot of people have, well, not most people, a lot of people have USD portfolios, and then obviously some have both. They've got USD, GBP. You are going to have a position where you are exposed, you are converting things over. If you've got an account that's denominated in US dollars, but you've got a few sterling holdings, then that's going to be converted over. Everything's going to be going back in one currency. So there are going to be some situations there where there is some sort of FX exposure. Maybe that goes against you marginally, maybe it goes for you marginally. There is probably going to be a week or two where you just have to accept the fact that your money's sitting around in cash in a currency it might not end up being fully invested in because you might want to convert some of it into another currency. I find some of the FX stuff a bit overstated. I think most of us, Cameron James, agree FX is sort of overstated as a benefit or a negative anyway. But yeah, when it comes to this, it's one of those. It's going to be annoying. There might be a situation, but of course, during that 2-week window, when you're sat in cash waiting to reinvest, the markets might go down, FX might go against you, and actually you're really happy. You made that FX switch and you're stuck in cash. So it's one of them. We won't know how annoyed or good or bad it is until the proof will be in the pudding.
And John, we will come up to the update which came out overnight. Before we get onto that though, what would you say clients should be doing today to prepare for the distribution? It's kind of a action time we could refer to as now.
Yeah, even some of the sort of, hey, I'm not going to do anything until right to the last minute sort of people we've been dealing with, which is fair enough. It has been one step forward, two steps to the side, three step back, and then do a backflip with some of this Brite stuff. And the update you've just referenced will be is case in point of that proof. But yeah, this really is the stage now. If we think that we're going through. We've got these interim distributions proposals that have been published. We've got we've got a court hearing on the 13th. We've got sort of 41 working days after those court orders are issued, which should be a day or two later. That gives us mid-January. So mid-January is not a lot of time, especially if you want to be, which I know we'll bring up more in a new video, if you're going to be changing trustees or putting in a position where you're looking to reinvest the funds on another platform or whatnot. It doesn't actually give you that long to figure out where you are now, what your options are, who you want to work with from a financial advisor point of view, from a SIP pure ops point of view, from a platform point of view, how you're going to reinvest. These things take time. And some people, you might want to get all that done before the payment details which are coming out mid-December and need to be sorted in mid-December. Now's the time to do it. It doesn't mean actually that you're going to be able to do all of that and get everything done, but at least you'll be well along in the way in the process. But yeah, now is definitely the time to get doing things. We'll obviously have confirmation on the 13th that everything's going ahead. So hopefully no more surprises between now and then or from that meeting. But yeah, absolutely now's the time to be getting your shortlist down, speaking to it. But it doesn't mean you have to make a decision between now and the 13th. But I mean, now's the time to get your shortlist together and do all your research and due diligence and all the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we look at all the Brite clients we've had reach out to us, it kind of seems like the last two, like a lot of people just sort of onboarded straight away. And when I say onboarded, you become the advisor on the account, but there isn't actually any money to manage yet because obviously the money's frozen. But a lot of people onboarded right at the beginning. Some people are like, okay, yeah, I'm checking you out against a couple other advisors. We've noticed in the past couple of months an uptick in the number of people actually physically onboarding now. And so onto the final point then, John. I know this information literally just came in overnight to do with the 75% and whatnot. Can you just quickly recap that for our viewers before we finish today?
Some of you may have read the blog post we put out the other week, which was to confirm the interim distribution that had gone out. Now that was fantastic news, because when the original interim distribution application was sort of deposited by the receivers, it was going to be roughly sort of 75% of the assets they were going to pay out. The reason why they were going to hold so much was because they'd taken a super duper conservative approach to how much tax the Australian tax office might ultimately withhold. Basically, rather than treating it as pensions and non-UK residents, it's almost like if they treated this as an investment account, brokerage account, and everyone was an Australian resident, so capital gains taxes and income taxes, dividend taxes, or whatever on the underlying, rather than deferment and then tax on withdrawal you pay locally when you live abroad or whatnot. That was an incredibly conservative assumption. Most people obviously pushed back quite heavily on that because it seemed a bit ridiculous. And whilst I think everyone's rather optimistic that's the ultimate case and it will be sort of much lower, given sort of they haven't been able to get sort of confirmed rulings, they haven't been able to get it all signed off and agreed with the tax office and the courts and stuff. This latest distribution, the latest update they had in the interim distribution was, we're going to pay out up to 92% or so of the assets. Now it's gone back to circa 75% because they want to withhold that tax. The tax they said, it's fine, we can pay it out now. Now they're saying, actually, no, we shouldn't do that, not yet. So it's looking like sort of there's going to be another, I think, circa 200 million of Australian dollars of tax withheld. Now, before I scare you and you go, damn it, here we go again. What I would say is there are a couple of meetings coming up actually this week about binding, rulings about how things are going to be treated. So that could all change and come back down again. It might not come down all the way down to, you know, it was like $16.6 million or so, USD dollars that was going to be withheld by what they thought per the interim distribution they published last week. It might not come down that far, but there might be, you know, 100 million off it or something. So really big material numbers. Everything's going to change. We're just not going to know. It's also subjective, and as you said, you know, we only saw, you know, we saw that the private ruling, or they wanted to enjoin them as a related or an interested party. The court said no. That came out the other week. I saw on Australian news. I'm Googling Brite Advisors news over the weekends. That's how much of a loser I am. But I saw that. So it all could change. But yeah, it does mean that there is sort of that second payment, which was going to be a sort of, hey, here's another, you know, I don't know, here's another $20 million or whatever because we've resolved everything. Might now be another, hey, here's another $150 million because we've resolved everything. Touch wood. You know, we're still optimistic that most of that is just ridiculously conservative, but, you know, they've taken a position better safe than sorry. They've also been told they'd be personally liable if they paid it out, the receivers themselves. So again, I think that, you know, they've taken the position that better safe than sorry.
Yeah. All right. Well, John, thank you for joining this morning. And for anybody watching, you know, your Brite Advisors exit, obviously it's happened. It looks like things are going to be resolved. But what we're stressing to all of our clients, this is normally just one of your assets. Actually, a lot of the clients have onboarded with us. We've done really great work on other areas that were completely unoptimized, whether it be 401k, ISAs back in the UK that are no longer relevant for them in the US. We've done so much gardening, so to speak, on people's financial planning and improved lots of other areas that they weren't even aware of. It's one of the things we noticed that with a lot of Brite Advisor clients, it was only the UK pension assets which have really been serviced and the other areas hadn't been looked at, which I found quite ironic when we considered that obviously earning money and generating fees was a big part of the advice processes. It seems strange they didn't advise on other assets. So get in touch below, have a conversation with ourselves, check us out against the competition, see if you think we're a good bunch, and we'll get our reports and stuff ready together for you so you can understand exactly what working with Cameron James looks like long before the distribution or physical money goes back to your trustee. Jonathan, thank you for joining this morning, and yeah, speak soon.
Yep, great.
Thanks, guys. And as always, take care of UK pension assets.